Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, why is it that when federal agents execute citizens in the streets, the Trump regime's first move isn't to investigate the shooting, but to claim the shooters are the victims? I'm Cody, your host for this week, joined by Arthur and Joe.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome back to Propaganda Loves You. This is week 2, episode 2 of season 2. I didn't mention it last week, but when I was talking about how we were kind of restructuring season 2, we're also shooting for like 40 episodes this season, 40 core episodes. And then we don't count our book club or deep dives against the core episode numbers. So roughly 40 weeks is what we're shooting for this year. So we've got a couple things to talk about. We're going to, like we mentioned last week, hit on the Trump regime's response to the shootings in Minnesota, what they said initially, and kind of analyzing some of the reasons why they may react the way they do. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but we could make some assumptions based off of writing that people have done. So before we get into that, Joe, Arthur, I just have one question for you today to kind of get us kicked off. And the question is, what do Elon Musk, Kevin Warsh, and Howard Lutnick have in common? It's probably more than one thing, but I figured I would get your thoughts first.
I'll go first. I can't think of anything because I recognize the first name, but I don't recognize the other two names.
That's fair. That's fair.
For whatever reason, I'm not familiar with those people's names.
You probably would have no reason to be, honestly, like in real life. Why should we know these people's names?
I only know Howard Lutnick and Elon, and I don't know the second one. And I'm just going to guess like Nepo Baby.
So Elon Musk, Howard Lutnick, and Kevin Warsh, they do have a couple different things in common. First, they're all billionaires. Howard Lutnick supposedly is around $3 billion. Kevin Warsh is around $2 billion. And Elon Musk obviously is the richest man in the world. They also all worked for or are going to work for the Trump administration. Howard Lutnick is the current Commerce Secretary. Elon Musk was the unofficial head of Doge for that time, special government employee, what you want to call it. Kevin Warsh is the new Fed chair pick to replace Jerome Powell that Trump has called for. So once Jerome Powell's up, this is the person that has been nominated. All three of these people also are mentioned repeatedly in the Epstein files. So there's the other thing that they have to have in common. I don't know how that works out, that the multiple members of Trump's cabinet happen to be mentioned in the Epstein files. But that's what these three have in common. Billionaires, work for Trump, and all mentioned within the files.
I didn't know they were replacing Jerome.
Yeah. His speech was actually really good. I don't know if you guys watched that or not, but so Trump came out for Jerome Powell and was like accusing him of fraud because he's wanted Jerome Powell to lower the interest rates for a long time and he just won't do it. And he really doesn't have anything to do. Like he has no weapon against Jerome Powell, so he's trying to go after him for fraud. And the instant that came out, announced that they were going to investigate him, it was like he already had this prepared, but he dropped this speech basically like, here's what he's saying, this is why it's bullshit, like just refuting it completely. And the Justice Department afterwards said, oh no, we're not actually investigating. Like they walked it back pretty much right away. So it's like, yeah. But anyway, his term is running out, so he won't be the chair. So.
Interesting.
Yeah. Joe, I saw you just I think internally just like biting your tongue like with these guys, like, and
I don't know how much biting my tongue or not, but like, yeah, it's hard to know what to say because like, obviously it pisses me off that the country is just run by this happy-go-lucky club of pedophilic billionaires, and we just have to sit here and talk about the show that we can't do it out. So yeah, just a general feeling of frustration and like, what the fuck is going on constantly in the background. Yeah, dealing with the feelings like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we're going to have to get into like what's actually coming out because like they just dropped 3 million more files, or the Justice Department did. I think it was like yesterday. Crazy what's in these things, like from all the unverified accusations and reports to stuff that seems to have been very much verified, and yet nobody was arrested somehow. So that we'll hit on that, in the upcoming weeks. I know that there's been good reporting, Joe, that you've mentioned on that. So hopefully we'll get into a little more detail and maybe see what are things other people are doing about this. What are the groups that are, because obviously the victims are still pushing and fighting back, despite the fact that Trump continues to call this a hoax in the White House as of like this week. So great icebreaker. Yeah. Get us started.
You guys have any New Year's resolutions? Did you do any New Year's resolutions this year?
Kind of a first year that I haven't in a while.
Maybe my resolution was basically just the way I'm living is kind of just like, as if the United States may not be a stable country and the dollar may plummet. So I'm kind of, pretending I'm retired this year, I think is my goal. Try and get to see what that feels like for a while.
Preparing for some eventualities?
Yeah, are you divesting in US dollar and buying euros?
That's why I'm trying to basically take my whole 401k and dump it into a business that has physical assets.
Not a bad idea. No, I mean, the New Year's resolution thing's kind of corny and trite. Like, I get that sometimes. It's always, I'm going to do a New Year's resolution. And then it's like end of January. Forget about that. I was just thinking it's a lighthearted icebreaker. That's not quite so. And like, I don't typically do them explicitly. I just kind of every now and then try to think, is everything working for me? Should I make some changes to the habits or whatever? I'm trying to read more, I guess. When I was in one thing that I enjoyed a lot about it was how much we got just by requirement. Like it's technically my job to read all these books. And so I got to just dive right in and really enjoy that. And since that's gone away and it's really just up to me now how much reading I do or don't do, I've kind of gotten. Last year I wanted to read 50 books and I didn't quite get there. I got to but I'm really trying to hit 50 this year. And January was a pretty good month. I got 6 done by the end of January. So that's mine for this year. Just trying to read a lot more.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I really like your idea of checking in intermittently, though. That's like a good resolution to just be like, hey, I'll check in once a month and see what's working and what's not, That's a great, long-term, sustainable goal.
New month resolution.
Yeah.
Joe, you've got a poem? Is that right?
Yeah, I just got
Let's do it.
This is going to set the tone for sure, because I don't specialize in poetry. I did all my serious English teacher stuff, studying novels and long form prose and stuff. So I always still kind of feel like an amateur when it comes to reading and understanding poetry. It was the form of literature that frustrated me the most. But there's a way of reading it that I have slowly come to appreciate that just kind of, you have to intentionally slow your thought process down and just take it as you would prose, like one sentence at a time, and try to understand each sentence. And one thing I did for my English class a few years ago, I would try to bring them a new poem, and I would try to find those random poems that are quote unquote famous that a lot of people randomly talk about, but then you feel left out if you don't really understand the reference or whatever. So I was just trying to give them all the references. If it came up at some point, they'd be like, oh yeah, I know about that. But in that vein, there is a famous poem called Ozymandias, Percy Bysshe. Percy Shelley was an English romantic poet. Died in 1822 at the age of 29 in a boating accident. But he was a very famous up-and-coming English, very politically active. You probably know his second wife, Mary Shelley, famous author of the science fiction novel Frankenstein. Frankenstein author's spouse, Percy Bysshe. So this poem, I'll read it once, and then if you guys have any initial reactions, we can talk about that. And some helps to read it a second, which is why I like to pick short poems. So here we go. This is Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So I'm interested if you guys have seen this poem before, and if not, if you have any initial reactions to that first read. Sometimes I have to read these things like 2 or 3 times before I feel like I actually understand what's going on.
Totally. I have to like read it again.
I think the only, like, I don't know that I even knew this came from a poem. I've heard the line, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. But I don't think I've ever seen it in the context of the full poem, actually. Really.
And that's exactly why I like sharing this one, because so many people have heard that part of it. Like that phrase is like in the zeitgeist a little bit, but now in the context, it like has other layers.
It changes the poem for sure.
Yeah. Maybe it's helpful, like, just to start with like basic plot is what happened in the poem. You know what I mean?
Well, it's an interesting thought, because when you read it the first time and after I read it through it one more time, it made me feel more like this was like a monument that was built to somebody that was like this over time destroyed. I was thinking it was like, oh, I left this great thing and then just time just tears it away and all that's left is, this, what is it? Yeah, the pedestal basically there.
I've heard the King of Kings and Ozymandias, and being a fan of my first graphic novel I ever read was Watchmen. Ozymandias is a character, of course, who kind of is like this powerful King of Kings who thinks, like this, maybe his whatever is going to last forever, I guess. And then I guess like the sand is in the decay everywhere. It's kind of like nature. I kind of read it like nature's going to win and nothing is going to last. Like water and air and earth and fire, those are commanding elements and nothing is going to last on this earth. So I don't know. I was kind of analyzing the line of the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And I thought, like, is that kind of like a contextual, like Ozymandias was like a cruel ruler and like that hand mocked them and like the hearts of the people fed, like there was like this life and that kind of fled as well. And even that is temporary. Poems are so hard.
Yeah, I totally agree that poems are hard. I used to get really frustrated with them. It helped me so much when I tried to just like think about, okay, a poem is just another way to tell a story, right? People have been using poetry to tell stories since time immemorial, right? Like that's just how the song it works. Like before we wrote things down, we told them in a sing-songy rhyming kind of way that was easy to memorize, and that was like a mnemonic device that allowed us to store stories in ourselves without having a written form. And so it's a story. What happened, right? So the speaker of the poem uses the first person pronoun I in the beginning, right? So there's a speaker. I did something. I met a traveler. So the speaker of this poem met a traveler, and this traveler he met told him a story. The story the traveler told him was about this thing in the desert that you could find, lifeless statue, right? These two trunks, these two legs, two vast and trunkless legs of stone. So there's no body attached. It's just two giant legs sticking out of the sand in the desert. And then there's this head. If you've seen that scene in The Lord of the Rings where they walk through the land of the kings and the king's head is on the ground, it's kind of like that. Like the king's head on the statue has fallen off. It's just lying there in the sand. You can kind of see the face, the visage. And the face has a facial expression on it, right? The face has the expression of a frown, a wrinkled lip, a sneer of cold command. You can kind of just see this fascist's face sitting in the sand right there, right? And his legs are still sticking up. And so this line you pointed out, Arthur, I'm really happy you did, tell that its sculptor well those passions read, right? This statue was made by a human person. It was carved by an artist who lived around the same time that this fascist might have lived, because the fascist might have said, hey, I want a big statue of me that's very pleasing for me to look at. You artisan person, please make me one, or order them to make them one. So the sculptor was in a certain relationship with this king at the time. The sculptor had to make this statue. And so the storyteller here is pointing out that you could tell from the way the face was constructed that the sculptor understood these emotions of cold command, a wrinkled lip, a frown. He sort of got inside the psychology of the fascist when he was making the sculpture. Stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them. So the hand of the sculptor is kind of mocking the fascist in the act of making it. And you can sort of think about what it feels like to make art in the time of fascism, how to get away with expressing it in a way where you don't get murked or whatever, but you still get to have your satire or your critique slipped in. It's sort of a subtle business for the artist trying to produce under fascism. And so the storyteller is just kind of appreciating that deftness of the artist who made the statue. And this quote that everyone knows, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty in despair," this intimidating statement. But then you look around and what do you see? It's just a wasteland. There's nothing there. There's just this lousy, half-decayed statue left of your works. These are your quote-unquote mighty works or whatever, right? It just kind of, what's the point of all this war, of all this fascism, of all this aggressive, I need to stamp my name on shit kind of mentality, when in the end it all just goes to dust and sand and nothing's left to show for it. So yeah, just a really iconic kind of poem. And when I try to work out the plot of it, just linearly figuring out what happened, these themes start to reveal themselves, and you can sort of map the theme onto the plot. And so the plot, for me anyway, as a frustrated reader of poetry, has been a way for me to help figure out what the theme of the poem is and feel like I understand it a little bit better. But yeah, that's how I tend to read this thing.
That's cool. I love the like how it really accentuates the labor aspect, and kind of like the labor is actually what's left, is, you know, as much of it that is left. And sometimes like I think of that with the Sphinx and with whatever great monuments we have, and we don't even know the sculptors, like who the actual individual was, and yet we know of the king or the ruler at the time that enslaved them.
Yeah, and this website, when you hover over Ozymandias, I don't know if that pops up for you.
Yeah.
But it's a reference to Pharaoh Ramses, an Egyptian pharaoh, 1279 to 12 BCE. So yeah, Sphinx is exactly the same. When I shared this with students a couple of years ago, I asked them just casually, because it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get students to talk about anything, to just kind of just don't. But you know, if you could just imagine, without verify too quickly, if our society just collapsed and went away, and then some archaeologist 1,000 years from now is coming across our cities, what are they going to discover? And they kind of had fun just imagining what kind of relics that they see walking around now are going to be left behind. Like, I don't know.
What's going to be left?
Think of Skyscraper, and that game Horizon Zero Dawn has a lot of fun with that idea too.
Well, we could bring this full circle. You know what's still going to be around for a while is sports stadiums. You know who owns sports stadiums? Billionaires like Steve Tisch, who's in the Epstein files. What?
Maybe somebody should carve the Epstein files into stone, just so nobody forgets.
That's a good call. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm making a bold stand now. I was gonna say that Trump should never get a monument or anything down in DC if we ever get back to it, but I think he should. And it should be the Epstein files. It'll basically be the same, just a wall with names and like acts or like, you know, what crimes they committed. That's the kind of shit that we should be putting in stone for thousands of years and remembering when people walk through DC. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
Are you a dedicated public servant, tired of being distracted by public opinion? Does managing your image profile take time away from your real work?
I was drowning. 1 minute, I needed to appeal to the rural base, and the next, the downtown developers. My approval rating was a roller coaster. I needed a way to satisfy every group without actually changing my agenda.
The Liberty Institute offers the solution. Our policy persona package delivers instantaneous, data-verified public positions that are custom designed for maximum constituency overlap. We eliminate the public consequence of your private actions.
That's exactly right. We simplify your life. Our service provides immediate, ideologically aligned talking points and crisis response scripts for all media appearances, all streamed directly to your earpiece.
It's incredible. Now I just read the script, and I can be completely decisive in my actions behind closed doors. The public loves the me on screen, which gives the real me total freedom to govern as I see fit.
We turn the unpredictable burden of public opinion into the asset of plausible deniability. Stop worrying about the fallout. Start governing without consequence.
Enroll in the Policy Persona package today. The Liberty Institute. We manage the image. You command the power.
The Liberty Institute is not responsible for any personal or spiritual crises resulting from the complete detachment of the user's political output from their personal ethics.
For our main topic today, what we wanted to talk about was the response of the Trump administration and officials within the Trump administration have had to the shootings, the murders that occurred in Minnesota. And the angle that I want to talk about this from is really looking at it from what is the initial thing that a lot of these officials do when there's a crisis, something like this happens, one of their federal agents shoots somebody, like what's the first thing that they tend to do? And what are the statements that are coming out, right? I want to kind of look at that and talk about why they might be making some of the statements they're making. And the reason I wanted to kind of have this general conversation, I think for a long time for me, I would get frustrated watching the news or watching reactions from certain politicians. This is like years ago, but like when something happens that you can see like the evidence of yourself, or you feel like like there's very compelling evidence that you don't need to get interpreted from somebody else, right? And you're watching this happen, and it's a terrible thing, and you see reactions come out that are completely not aligned with whatever the evidence is, or it's like this knee-jerk defense of whatever action took place. And I think what I used to think was like, how is that possible? Like you have this evidence here, like how are you coming back and saying that? Or how are you saying this first, like before we have evidence? Like the normal thing to do is, yes, something happened, acknowledge this, we will do an investigation into it, and then you come back later, like after you have like some more information on what occurred. But the knee-jerk reaction of automatically just coming out and either denying or victim blaming or something like that, it would drive me crazy to see, because it didn't logically make any sense. And what made this easier for me is just like take logic out of it. Like that has no place here, or at least standard logic of like something happened. We need to find out what happened before we form an opinion. That's not the logic that they are using in this scenario. And that's kind of the conversation I wanted to have today and talk about that a little bit. And so to kick this off, I actually have an article here that was in Forbes, interestingly enough. This came out on January 26, 2026. The title for the article is How Trump Officials, specifically Noam, Miller, and Patel, Portrayed Peretti as Violent Despite Conflicting Evidence. And this is by Allison Durkee, Forbes staff, senior news reporter covering U.S. politics and legal news. So I'm going to read through this article, and then there's two concepts that I want to talk about related to this. One is called DARVO, which is deny, attack, reverse. I'll talk a little bit about that, who actually coined that, where it came from. We'll talk about that, see if you guys think that applies in this scenario. And then also afterwards talk a little bit about performative lying, what that is, and if that applies to this scenario. So with that, let me jump into the article first. Here we go. In trying to defend the killing of Alex Peretti on Saturday, Trump administration officials repeatedly tried to portray him as a violent domestic terrorist, even an assassin, running counter to emerging video evidence and first-person accounts of the deadly encounter. Peretti, a 37-year-old ICU nurse at a VA hospital, was shot at least 10 times by Border Patrol agents in Minnesota on Saturday. That's when this occurred, on Saturday the 24th, after he appeared to intervene in an altercation between ICE agents and other observers. The Department of Homeland Security claimed after Peretti's death he had violently resisted officers and that the incident looked like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Similar claims have been made by top Trump officials, with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem claiming Peretti attacked law enforcement while brandishing a gun, and Deputy Chief of Staff Miller describing Peretti as an assassin who tried to murder federal agents, both saying he appeared to be a domestic terrorist. But video footage shows Peretti, a licensed gun owner who was carrying at the time, never took out his gun, and law enforcement took the firearm away before he was shot. Video evidence and sworn witness testimony indicate Peretti approached law enforcement during their altercation with other civilians, filming the incident on his phone but never taking out his gun or acting violently towards officers. ICE agents pepper sprayed Peretti and the other civilians before tackling Peretti to the ground with multiple agents, then shooting him, evidence shows. President Donald Trump suggested Peretti's death was the result of Democratic-run sanctuary cities and states that are refusing to cooperate with ICE. Issuing a Truth Social post Saturday that decried Democrats' opposition to his immigration policies and claimed, "Tragically, 2 American citizens have lost their lives as a result of this Democratic-ensued chaos." In an interview with the Wall Street Journal on Sunday, Trump did not say whether he believed the agents who shot Peretti acted appropriately, saying only, we're reviewing everything, and will come out with a determination. The president also criticized Peretti for carrying a gun, saying, "I don't like any shooting, I don't like it, but I don't like it when somebody goes into a protest and he's got a very powerful, fully loaded gun with 2 magazines loaded up with bullets also. That doesn't play good either." When asked Monday about other administration officials using the term domestic terrorist to describe Peretti, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said she had not heard the president characterize Mr. Peretti in that way and claimed Trump wants to let the facts and investigation lead itself. Noam claimed on Saturday that Peretti had a weapon on him and multiple dozens of rounds of ammunition, wishing to inflict harm on these officers coming brandishing like that. This isn't not quotes, but brandishing a gun means to display it in an intimidating manner, which there is no evidence Peretti did. That was added in by the author there. FBI Director Kash Patel similarly claimed Sunday that Peretti was trying to attack law enforcement and falsely claimed the victim did not have a right to carry a gun at the protest, which multiple gun rights groups have criticized as false. "You cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have the right to break the law," Patel told Fox Business, though there is no evidence Peretti was acting unlawfully. Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bonvino claimed it looked like Peretti wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement, though in an interview with CNN on Sunday, the immigration official could not support his claims Peretti assaulted federal officers. Officials have appeared to somewhat temper their language as time has passed since Peretti's death. Noam has not repeated the false claims that Peretti brandished his gun and said Sunday only that he was laying hands on law enforcement rather than attacking them. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche shied away Monday from describing Peretti's actions towards law enforcement as an act of domestic terrorism after Noam and Miller used that language over the weekend. Leavitt was asked Monday about why officials jumped to conclusions about Peretti, responded, "This has obviously been a very fluid and fast-moving situation," the press secretary said. "She only speaks for Trump, who wants to let the investigation continue." Video of Peretti's killing, confirmed by the New York Times, appears to show Peretti approaching federal border agents as they speak to civilians while a person is being detained. He is filming the scene after the border agents shove one of the civilians to the ground. Peretti appears to put himself between the civilians and law enforcement, still holding his phone to record. At no point does Peretti appear to be engaging in any violence towards law enforcement. The agents pepper spray the civilians and tackle Peretti to the ground, at which point, the Times notes, one agent struck Peretti with the pepper spray canister while the other appeared to pull Peretti's gun from him and remove it from the scene. While Peretti was on the ground being restrained, ICE agents then fired shots at Peretti, appearing to fire at least 10 shots within the span of 5 seconds, the Times notes. Multiple witnesses filed sworn declarations about Peretti's death in a court case over the deployment of ICE agents to Minnesota. An unnamed children's entertainer who witnessed Peretti's death said they went to the scene because whistles alerted them to the fact that ICE agents were in the area. Peretti appeared to be sort of acting to help traffic move more smoothly as the witnesses arrived on the scene while filming the scene, and after the agent asked the witnesses as the witness arrived on the scene while filming the scene, and after an agent asked the witness and other observers to move back, Peretti stayed in the street and continued filming, later approaching agents as they threatened other observers at the scene. "I didn't see Peretti reach for or hold a gun," the witness noted. After ICE agents shoved other observer to the ground and started pepper spraying Peretti and other observers, Peretti put his hands above his head and the agent sprayed him again and pushed him, the witness said. Peretti was trying to help the woman the ICE agent had shoved to the ground when ICE agents grabbed him and pulled him to the ground, with the witness noting, "It didn't look like he was trying to resist, just trying to help the woman up." The agents then started shooting Peretti, according to the witness, who wrote, "I don't know why they shot him. He was only helping." Another witness, a 29-year-old pediatrician, arrived on the scene after witnessing the shooting from their apartment, noting they did not see Peretti attack the agents or brandish a weapon of any kind. The witness approached Peretti to administer medical help, testifying none of the agents were trying to administer CPR and Peretti was lying on his side, which is not proper procedure for someone who had been shot. Rather than check for a pulse or administering CPR, the witness wrote the federal agents appeared to be counting bullet wounds. Peretti's family and friends vehemently condemned the Trump administration's comments about the killing and efforts to describe him as violent, instead characterizing him as a kind nurse who cared deeply about helping others. Peretti's parents slammed the administration's sickening lies about their son and said they were heartbroken, but also very angry, describing Peretti in a statement as a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his friends, family, and wanted to make a difference in this world before his death. Please get the truth out about our son. He was a good man, they wrote. Arthur, you read that full statement last week. So as I read through this, like this whole thing, right, you're going down through, you get to the reactions that people have, domestic terrorists, like brandishing weapons, saying that they're coming at this from like he was trying to assault officers immediately. And then what seems to have happened is the evidence is just so clear that they have to roll this back. They've gotten so much pushback. There's a couple podcasts that I've listened to recently. One's with Jon Stewart and one's one of the Pod Save America ones. Pod Save America guys, they do a lot when it comes to looking at polls and whatnot. So if you're interested in polls, they've done some analysis since this has happened, what the Trump administration has done and what that's done to the general Republican Party's approval ratings and whatnot. So I'll link those. But the point being, there actually seems to be enough clear evidence from these people that were there on the ground giving statements, filming, that the administration has no choice but to roll back some of their rhetoric on this, which is good. I think that's a good thing in my mind. I don't know if there's actually going to be change, but it's proof to me that enough pressure can force them to do something. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that article, specifically how, they're coming out initially really strong, denying, like attacking the victim, saying that this is his fault or this is Democrats' fault. Any thoughts there before we talk about those two concepts of that I mentioned?
The most shocking piece of the article, which kind of highlights what you're saying here for me, was like near the end where it said, because this occurred Saturday, the 24th, and then it says, Levitt asked Monday about why officials jumped to conclusions, responded, this has obviously been a very fluid and fast-moving situation. They defined the timeline, so they made it a fast-moving situation. And then it says, the press secretary said she only speaks for Trump, who, quote, wants to let the investigation continue. On Monday, following Saturday, the president wants to let the investigation continue. That's like just a ridiculous statement. Yeah. And anyway, I think that just kind of highlights like, yeah, the narrative was probably there before the incident even occurred. Like they probably have a playbook that they go by, and it's really disgusting what they did. And my other reaction is like shooting somebody 10 times, like literally try to pull a trigger 10 times. That's murder. And if it's two people and that's still murder. Like that is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Mainly like perspective and in terms of, if you're a fascist and you're trying to quote unquote control the narrative, the value and the importance of everyday people being able to record their experiences and share them with people in detail. I guess the good thing about human beings in general is that we trust our own embodied experience instinctually. Like if we see something or hear something or smell something, taste whatever, we feel something with our bodies, we're more likely to trust it as a reality because it's tangible. We can see it. Right? And that's the power of like video and audio recording these events. It gives you the sense that you can kind of see and feel what's. And so the more everyday observers are able to share the more stories like that get out about atrocities that take place, the more people can trust that everyday average person's experience more than, Mr. Millionaire on CBS who's telling them what happened, or the Trump administration spokesperson who's telling them what happened. They know that the other story is bullshit because they trust this other more direct experience. It's just important to keep observing, keep sharing. I really like this tactic that the Minneapolis organizers have figured out with the whistles and the sort of mutual aid process they have going on. Clearly, it's been effective, and it's possibly been the main thing that's been keeping the public on the right side of this.
That's huge. And it's the only thing that, like, if there was no, I mean, the woman in the pink coat, like they're referring to her. I listened to her testimony on this from, like, and I'll include that in the pocket. It's too long to include in this episode for us, but I'll link it in there in the timestamp so you can go listen to it. But like, if she wasn't there, if the other people weren't there to film this, like, what's the story that comes out? It's what they put out first, right? There's another person that was shot and killed in Chicago that we hardly heard about at all because he was I'm using quotes for those listening, but illegal immigrant, right? Like, as soon as that is the story, he was shot and killed. How much outrage did we see there? There was no video evidence of what actually occurred, right? That's just to your point, Arthur, what you said, the playbook, right? Like, thing happens, they're not reacting to what actually happened. They're reacting to an event, and then we do X, right? Like, that's kind of like the feeling that I get. I agree with you on that. It's just like, they were prepared to react a certain way, regardless of what the evidence said initially. Evidence is secondary, and it's only if it's powerful enough to challenge their narrative to the point where they could get in trouble that they would feel like they have to try to change their narrative.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because it's like when you hear these things that are counterintuitive to our human experience, that we do see this anecdotal evidence of, I'm personally filled with like this frustration of like, I feel like I have to keep being the defender. Like, they put me on the defense, like, and I have to defend these ludicrous things that they're saying, when in fact it's like the question should be like, well, what principles really govern lethal force, and how is that justified, and how is that evidence gathered, and who gets to define that, and is there going to be due process for, and like, the administration does not like due process. Trump said in some interview he wants like quick trial. So I think it's like refusing their entire authority.
Yeah.
I'm over it.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, I was just gonna mention another aspect, which is kind of like narrative endurance, which is the other aspect that's a little bit harder to deal with, because I mean, there are so many examples of how fascists run their playbook about propaganda, but the one that sticks out the most to me, perhaps because it affected me so much when it happened, after the Israeli attacks on Gaza started in 2023. The Al-Shifa hospital got bombed. It was where a lot of refugees were going for protection. All their homes were getting destroyed, and there was thousands of people in like the hospital courtyard complex just taking shelter. Tons of civilians, many, many children, elderly people, etc. And there was clear video evidence someone had taken in Gaza from like a rooftop nearby the hospital of this. I mean, the audio in that video is just like heart-wrenching because it's like so loud and terrifying. This giant missile just comes careening in really quick, and it's a huge explosion. And the Israeli regime immediate line about that was, oh, it was a Hamas rocket that went stray and accidentally hit the hospital or something. And when you see that missile hit the hospital in the video, that's not some rocket that someone just hodgepodge put together. That's like that's a industrial level massive warhead that's just going. It's those 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs. That's what it seemed like. And so just watching their narrative unfold about that, they lied. Biden was visiting Israel around the same time, and he did like a press conference with Netanyahu, and that came up at some point in their conversation, and Biden was just like, yeah, it's a terrible thing that happened. And he kind of looked at Netanyahu, he was like, but it seems like the other team did it. And they kind of looked at each other a little bit. Months later, the Israelis put out some statement where they kind of admitted that they did bomb the hospital, but by that point they had already bombed a dozen more, and at this point now they bombed them all. And so just the narrative endurance, if they can get away in the short term with just parroting that lie and wait until the public stops caring about the event, then they can admit it months later, and there's not really any afterwards, and we're waiting on consequences to take place for people to be held accountable. And in the meantime, we have jobs and lives and things going on, and we get distracted, and then nobody gets punished.
Yeah, I think totally. That's like, it's like orchestrated by like high-end like marketing. Like the world experts are putting these things together, and like it kind of seems like a bumbling idiot gets on TV and like has a bit of charisma, but kind of like is old and dementia and says these things. But it's like these are carefully curated strategies that they deploy, and it comes across like this. And then like a month later they bury the truth, and you're just like so inundated with this stuff that it's like, What is the truth? What was real? I don't know. I'll just believe whatever first comes out of their mouth.
It that whole playbook thing, it's almost the inverse of what the old government playbook would be, which is like something happens. If it's bad, you immediately come out and say, hey, this is terrible. We're going to take some time. We got to figure out what's going on. And then you wait and you see what public opinion does, and that drives your next action, right? This is the opposite. We have our story. We're coming with it. We're attacking with the story. We're not defending. We are going to push what the narrative is. We're going to see what the public says, and we're just going to tweak it until our narrative is the one that's working, right? And we don't care if we're lying constantly. It doesn't matter because, like you said, Joe, as time goes on, people will forget things. They keep tweaking it until it finally, they get something, I guess, to stick, right?
And if the public's really not letting it go, if they're really hanging on, well, I'm afraid to say the next one. You gotta set up a new event that distracts everybody away from that event.
I thought you were just gonna say call it a hoax and then like find somebody and be like, oh, they're not sexy. This person's sexy. You know, just go on an all caps rant on Twitter until people forget.
Yeah,
need some distraction.
Yeah,
pronto,
definitely.
Maduro's not sexy. Look at it.
God. But the other thing, like, and I wanted to hit this point too, Arthur, I think you said this, like, you feel like you're constantly having to defend against this narrative that they're creating. And that's the point, right? Like, if you're constantly like, this is insane, let me go figure out all the reasons this is insane. And they've already spun 12 different, versions like afterwards, like you can't keep up. And I agree. It's good work that the New York Times did on both of those videos. They did really good analysis, like looking at the videos, slowing them down, showing, like highlighting, here's where hands are, here's, what's occurring, and like all these different things. But the fact that we have to have that argument is the frustrating part, right? Person murdered in the street by federal agents. There should be an investigation. There shouldn't be a question. It's just ridiculous that we're at this point where we're defending, we have to try and defend against murderers. Like, that's like the public has to do that because Department of Justice and the government is not going to. So yeah, public is the only thing holding this accountable, I guess.
They bring up each individual action to like spin you. And the only action they don't bring up is like the killing, the murder, it ends there. But like before it's like, well, he's brandishing a weapon. He's carrying a weapon. It was loaded. Well, now maybe he taunted the officer. Maybe a week ago he kicked a puppy. Maybe, and it's just like, what the, like, what? He died. Let's talk about the lethal force.
Yes. Yeah. Nothing he did, and nothing Renee Good did justifies lethal force. Like that's the shortest version of all this.
Agents are like, okay, first of all, I don't even know about like agent, like news articles shouldn't call them agents, but like if they are going to go not kidnap people, but like detain them, like, should they even have lethal force? What is the point of that? I saw a video just before we recorded where officer pistol whipped a guy who's just holding his hands up. Like, why do you have these? Could tasers work? Could like non-lethal force of some other variety work?
Yeah. And I mean,
I agree completely with the lethal force. It's kind of like the opposite problem, public perception. Well, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm trying to work out an analogy on the spot. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. But how I often talk about democracy, like, oh, we believe we live in a democracy. We just kind of accept that as a reality without really digging into, wait, what is democracy really? Do we really have it? Are we sure? Lethal, should we have it? Should it exist? What are the actual circumstances under which it's okay to end someone's life? Should the state have that authority? To what extent? Who should have it? How far should it be distributed? What are the procedures that should be in place to prevent people from getting access to firearms as a federal officer? Some of these people are just, a lot of people on TikTok, just like random investigative people who are internet sleuths will find the name of an ICE officer and dig into their personal record and find out, oh, they have all of these records as like a sex offender, and they just immediately got hired, no problem. And so these sex offenders who made a illegal practice of kidnapping children now have a professional federal paycheck for kidnapping maybe children as well, or adults or whatever. But like you take, you know what I mean? Who should have lethal force? We're just sort of throwing it out like candy, at a parade or something. You get a gun and you get a gun and you get a gun. It's like Oprah. It's ridiculous. Like, What are we doing?
When I was a kid, like the picture of a cop that I had in my mind, or even I think most media and stuff like that, was always the dude with the blue suit, like, right? Like, and he had the hat, and usually, like, maybe there was a gun. Usually there was a billy stick, something like that, the cartoon version of a cop. But like today, it's just like, are you in Afghanistan or are you in Minnesota? Right? Like, that should not be like, you shouldn't have to ask that question, right? Just your point, Joe. Like, yeah, some professional standard. Like, I don't know. It just seems so crazy that we're even having this conversation right now of like professional lethal standards for cops. It's like, it seems so easy to me. Like, if you or other people are not at risk of being killed by somebody, then you shouldn't be killing people. Blowing my mind a little
You
bit.
could ventriloquize the fascist and be like, oh, well, kidnapping people and separating them from their families is risky business. We know they're going to hate us when we do it, so we got to kill them because they're going to try to stop us.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what it's going to come down to. It's like, in order to destroy people's families, we have to kill people sometimes. That's what they're going to say. And some people are going to accept that, but I'm hopeful that most of us are going to call bullshit on that and do something about it.
I was just going to say to y'all's points, like, the agents getting the lethal force, or as we've seen with the ICE hiring, like they're convicted felons sometimes, they're fired from other places. It's totally ludicrous. And my thought was like, why can't we, like, if we literally wanted, you could have an industry of like tranquilizer guns, right? Like, it sounds ludicrous and you might laugh because it's like so crazy, but like, why not? Why can't we just like, we could develop something, a net gun would probably also do the trick, Like, it's crazy, but yeah, just non-lethal force.
Honestly, I'd much rather see a bunch of people dressed like Steve Irwin running around with net guns than what we've got right now. Like that, I would 100% take that hands down compared to where we are in life. So yeah, we're going to talk about just these two concepts really quick. Arthur, this first one, DARVO, this is actually Jennifer J. I think it's Freud, not Freud, Freyd. She is the professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Oregon. So
Nice.
who knows? Yeah, you should go down and just be like, hey, you want to
for sure.
get an interview? If this episode's decent, who knows? Maybe we could just send it to her and be like, hey, you want to come in and talk about this a little bit? Or she'll be like, you guys got this real wrong. You should take that down. But anyway. Yeah, so she, American psychologist, has over 30 years of experience, focused specifically on betrayal trauma, and was the one that coined DARVO, actually, as a term. So I'm on her website, which I'll include in the show notes so you can check it out, that talks about DARVO, what it is, and I'll just read this top part here. This page is called, What is DARVO? DARVO refers to a reaction perpetrators of wrongdoing, particularly sexual offenders, may display in response to being held accountable for their behavior. DARVO stands for Deny, Attack, and Reverse Victim and Offender. The perpetrator or offender may deny the behavior, attack the individual doing the confronting, and reverse the roles of victim and offender such that the perpetrator assumes the victim role and turns the true victim, or the whistleblower, into an alleged offender. This occurs, for instance, when an actual guilty perpetrator assumes the role of falsely accused and attacks the accuser's credibility and blames the accuser of being the perpetrator of a false accusation. Institutional DARVO occurs when DARVO is committed by an institution or with institutional complicity, as when police charge rape victims with lying. Institutional DARVO is a pernicious form of institutional betrayal. And then she's got one more term here called anti-DARVO, which refers to ways to reduce the negative impact of DARVO and also teaching more constructive responses to allegations. And so what I thought was interesting here was just the institutional DARVO and how that kind of fits into the reactions that we see from a lot of the administration officials. The immediate reaction is deny or blaming the victim, saying they're the ones responsible for this, for being in the location of a police action, right? Like where they're trying to enforce things, or bringing a gun that you are registered to own and are not brandishing to a protest, which, did you bring it to a protest or did you happen to go out into a street where an action was taking place because whistles are being blown in your neighborhood, right?
Yeah. I also saw a bunch of like Reddit videos this week that people posted in a flock of like white people carrying AR, whatever assault rifles they want, to like the BLM or Black Lives Matter protests back, before or anything before 2020. So it's very selective of which political party they're talking about.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's people that literally took over the state house. I think
Oh yeah.
Where was that? I'm trying to remember. Was that Michigan? Was the Michigan State House that they came into, like fully loaded up and kitted up? And what did everyone do? They let them stay there, and they didn't shoot at them, and then they let them leave. Like, weird. Anyway, so that's the one that I'd love to dig into more, maybe someday, with that Professor Jennifer Freud. I would love to get their thought on how this looks from the institutional perspective. But that's the one thing that kind of came out. And then the other that I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on was just performative lying, which is a thing that I think a lot of people talk about. Actually, there's a Hannah Arendt connection here, Arthur, with something that she said as a quote. But the performative lying, it's essentially lying knowing that others know you're lying, and that's the point of doing it. Like, you are lying to them. There's nothing they can do about it, right? Like, you have so much power at this point that I can tell you what is true, and even if it's not true, like, there's nothing you can do about it, and that's going to demoralize you, and that's going to be like, well, what's the point, right? Like, it's this other tactic of lying on purpose for the point of demoralization of others by making them feel like they literally can't, stop it. So those are kind of the two concepts that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on as it relates to how the administration reacts in these situations.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that last thing you said, and it connected with something that in the dawn of everything they had about power, about how it works, about how a powerful group. Essentially, it was like there's an oppressive regime, and then there's the people who are being oppressed by that regime. And both the regime and the people fully understand the reality of the situation. But there's a public narrative that the regime presents publicly, which is patently false, and the regime knows it, and the people know that it's false. But the test of the power is that if the people just allow that narrative to continue and no one challenges them, that's what real power means, is the ability to coerce the masses into just going along with your obvious lie. And it kind of seems like exactly the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, totally. I think that exact point, like the coercive power, and I guess what it makes like politically possible, that denial, because obviously if we had a ruler or leader who acknowledged the Preddy case as murder, they might take actions to stop further murders or have a moral sentiment on one side. But if they just deny it, then of course they can continue on doing whatever they want and claim that it's up in the air and there's an pending investigation from their DOJ that they put in charge that caused this in the first place. So I get it. It's an interesting playbook.
This is the quote that I wanted to read from Hannah Arendt. This was in her first book published, The Origins of Totalitarianism. The quote is, "Mass propaganda discovered that its audience was ready at all times to believe the worst, no matter how absurd, and did not particularly object to being deceived because it held every statement to be a lie anyhow. Totalitarian mass leaders based their propaganda on the correct psychological assumption that under such conditions, one could make people believe the most fantastic statements one day and trust that if the next day they were given irrefutable proof of their falsehood, they would take refuge in cynicism. Instead of deserting the leaders who had lied to them, they would protest that they had known all along the statement was a lie and would admire the leaders for their superior tactical cleverness." I have not read a lot of Hannah Arendt.
And it continues. Yeah, it continues today.
Dropping bars, yeah.
I feel like I need to read more.
Yeah, she's got some really good stuff. She's got some really great stuff on the Nuremberg trials too, and talking about power in general, especially in the face of fascism and Nazis.
But I guess the only other thing I would say about the performative lying, just to close that out, I think there's one more aspect to it, and that's the audience that they're actually trying to reach. And if it's Trump, then being aggressive and whatnot is generally better for them if they make Trump happy. So I guess that's the only other thought I had there, is like, it's a lot of performative for him specifically too, from his cabinet members, I think.
Thinking about that comment, I'm just also thinking about long-term coverage that we were talking about before we recorded, and I know the midterms are coming up and we're going to hear speeches from various politicians and stuff. And one thing that's sort of fun is a relative word here, during election season when there's debates and people are on stage and politicians are making all these vague statements. Sometimes the political speak is hard to parse, and we can just kind of get overwhelmed and frustrated and assume it's all meaningless. And a lot of it kind of is meaningless in a certain way. It's a way of avoiding saying anything too specific or too committed to any one policy. But you can start to read the subtext of who their intended audiences are, because sometimes it's specific donor groups or specific lobbying groups, and they're trying to, in a very subtle way, signal publicly to those groups that they're on their side. I don't know. It's just it's a layer of rhetoric to read into during election season that might get kind of fun. But what you were saying about Trump, about how a lot of the lies are specifically for him to try to convince him of a certain worldview. Yeah, politicians cater to him in that way. However, but they do it to companies, they do it to corporations. It's a weird thing to look for, but just thought about that.
I actually really like that idea of maybe we do like we can all watch a clip or something and then individually come up with like who do we think the audiences were for that, or like what parts, like compare notes on it as we get closer to election season. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsor.
Is your mind cluttered with information the authority has categorized as obsolete? You've lasted this long on sentimentality, but the cost of carrying outdated facts is paid in lost opportunity.
I couldn't stop referencing history that the Heritage Vault had depreciated. My ideas felt heavy and complex, and what's worse, I was passed over for promotions because my thinking simply wasn't streamlined enough. I realized my mind was literally slowing down my career.
The Cognitive Parity Enrollment is a precision upgrade, not a full replacement. Your core competence remains intact. We simply replace outdated ways of thinking with current, universally accepted frameworks.
This is the cost of operating at the executive level. We ensure your public output is always up to the minute, zero friction, and perfectly aligned with current systemic metrics. Your ability to fit in is now your greatest asset.
After the seminar, my mind is so much faster. My supervisor even remarked that my thinking is now, quote-unquote, refreshingly current. I'm letting go of the past for a better future for myself.
Enroll in the Cognitive Seminar today. The Heritage Institute. The only truth that pays.
Before we close, we wanted to share something that actually is positive and not escapism, but shows some counterexamples of some solidarity here. This month, I think on January 17th, the High Seas Treaty, I guess last month now, but it's a few weeks old. The High Seas Treaty officially entered into force, which is like a UN initiative put together in originally 2023, and it's the first binding global agreement that's going to govern international high seas, which actually take up like 2/3 of the water. And until now, they're effectively large like gray zones, and there's no binding way to create like marine protected areas or a global requirement. This treaty is changing that, and it creates a process for establishing protected areas in international waters, environmental impact assessments for activities like deep sea mining. They could even potentially change up shipping and cargo ship patterns due to migratory habits of whales and stuff. So it's actually pretty cool. And, previously unprotected simply because there's no jurisdiction. So now international law, hopefully, taking a step for some protection there. And the second thing, I wanted to do something a little closer to home. This one is in San Francisco, California, where the mayor announced a pretty cool initiative where they're going to expand free childcare for families making up to about $230,000 a year, which sounds like a lot, but that is just how expensive it is in the Bay Area. I remember I got a job in the Bay Area once, and there was an article that had come out at the exact same time, and so I remember it forever in the Chronicle, where it said that $105,000 is the new poverty level if you're a single earner in San Francisco, California. So $230,000, it sounds like a lot, but really cool public policy that can materially change people's lives, and a reminder that states and cities can exercise power through provision and not through punishment. So that's the good news for the week.
I like it. That's awesome. And I think on a similar vein, I think Mamdani announced a program that he's working with the governor of New York, Hochul, on, universal childcare for New York City. It's good to see that that's spreading in multiple areas, and states are looking at ways to do that. So that's good to hear. Yeah, same plug for me for this week, which is just if you're in the Saranac Lake area over the Winter Carnival, come on down to the AVFC Community Hub at 28 Broadway. We're going to do some activities there, showing the movie, the Lorax 1970 version. So come on in, see it out. Or come on out and see it. Come on in, whatever. You know what I'm saying.
Come on over and see it out. That kind of sounded like the end of a Rick and Morty bit or something at the end.
Yeah, so like international, what did they call it? Interdimensional cable.
Yeah. Great episode. No, not defending the creator there. I know he's in some trouble. Not Dan Harmon, but the other guy.
No, they fired him. They got rid of him.
Did they?
Yeah. So, hey, and I think the show is better for it because it comes out every other year or every year instead of every 5 years.
I love the good news you shared, Arthur. It just made me think about that Tupac line. You got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. So it's good to see governments, and it seems like it's usually local governments that are doing it. Usually the city level, sometimes a state, like you were saying with Mamdani and Pocho, maybe they'll work out a state level thing, but especially at the municipal level, it's always really, really nice to see people being taken care of. A lot of hungry kids in this world. So the more we can feed kids, educate them, that's good news. I like hearing that. I don't really have any plugs in general other than to look into your local general strike actions. That's taking place, organizing on a city by city level. There are a lot of networks, and it's distributed widely with not much hierarchy for a reason, because it's harder to dismantle that way. So if you want to get involved with general strike stuff, your local organizing groups probably have something going on if you're anywhere near a big city. Go to generalstrikeus.com, look into your local subgroup, get connected with people who are organizing near you, and stay connected to your mutual aid networks.
Nice. My plug I thought about today was how, I guess like before the show, we always kind of build these episodes on things that we actually encounter in real life all the time, and we discuss them. And so, if the episode helps you like understand narratives, or if you see like repeated narratives that you want dissected, I think send it to us. And, we love to build episodes around what people actually encounter. So if there is one that you see, I encourage you to send it. We got Reddit, email on the website, of course, but yeah, send it our way for the fans, for the fan episodes.
100% echoed that. Yeah. I'm terrible at keeping things updated. So if that's why you're looking at our website and you're like, why does it say episode 48? Just blame me. I'll take the call for that, and I'll try to get that updated. But the email does work. That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out with us.
If you enjoy the show, help us spread the word. Leave a rating or review and share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think would get something out of these conversations.
Your ratings, reviews, and shares help this show grow, and the more people listening, the harder it is for propaganda to win.
So until next time,
stay aware, stay safe, and remember,
propaganda loves you.